What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, January 31st, 2017. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And let's see, a little reminder that tomorrow Don Wiskin will be our on-air guest talking about Extendivite. And getting into the news here, they're calling it the Monday Night Massacre. And Donald Trump, I guess, is channeling his former persona from his reality TV show, because he's out there saying, "You're fired." And he has fired the acting Attorney General, Sally Yates, because apparently Sally Yates was instructing the Department of Justice lawyers not to legally challenge any of these court rulings, these judges saying that the immigration executive order cannot be carried out. Now, of course, the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, they are following the order right now. They're ignoring the judge's rulings. And obviously, the Attorney General just openly defied Donald Trump and has now been fired. And then later on that same night, Trump let the acting director of Immigration Enforcement go and replaced that individual as well. And Trump is showing he is the boss. And regardless of whether you agree with him or not, he's obviously a strong leader. He's certainly provoking a lot of confusion. In fact, he may be moving even a little too fast. But better that we have a president who's treating it like it's a real job than some of the predecessors which sit back, bask in the glory, and kind of let the nation run itself off the edge of a cliff here. Now then, everybody's screaming about unconstitutional this, that, and all the rest of it. No, Trump can't do it. He's not allowed to. Actually, he is, because back in 1952, there was a bill passed, the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, sometimes called the McCarran-Walter Act. And it says, among other things, the President may, by proclamation, and for such a period as he shall deem necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens, immigrants or non-immigrants, or impose any restrictions on the entry of aliens he may deem to be appropriate. This law is 65 years old. Nobody's ever called it unconstitutional before. And this law was signed into law by a Democratic president, Harry Truman. And it was last used by another Democratic president, Jimmy Carter, to block Iranians from coming to the United States, and even beyond that, deported 15,000 Iranian students for student visa violations. And then we need to go back and realize that basically Trump's vetting order is based on yet another law passed by Congress and signed into law by Obama in 2015. This was the Visa Waiver Program Improvement and Terrorist Travel Prevention Act. It was part of an omnibus spending bill. So Trump isn't doing anything predecessors have not done. They're just trying to make a big deal about it. And we are now getting confirmation that Trump's caution is justified, because as it turns out, since 2014, 3 years ago, 17 alleged terrorists who were planning harm in this country originated from the countries on Trump's list. He is being appropriately cautious. And, of course, all the immigrants and the refugees and everything, they're out there saying, "Oh, we're here now. You can't get rid of us. We want to." Do you realize that one of the big reasons Donald Trump won his election is because the American people are sick and tired of immigration? We're sick and tired of competing for American jobs with non-Americans. We're sick and tired of all these diseases being brought into our country. We're sick and tired of seeing illegal immigrants and refugees get a better deal from the American government than the American people do. And we've had enough. And that's a big reason why Donald Trump won this election. Because Hillary was out there saying, "Oh, yeah, we're going to let everybody in." Obama literally made a statement that illegal immigrants could vote without fear of deportation. Well, illegal immigrants are not supposed to vote anyway. Now, Ron Paul is saying that a much better solution than a border wall is to remove the welfare magnet. I wholeheartedly agree. Stop all these wars in the Middle East that have made these people refugees, and end the drug war that incentivizes smugglers to cross the border. All of these things will work, as well as enforcing the existing laws against harboring, transporting, or employing non-citizens. Now, Angela Merkel is out there saying that Germany will support those affected by the U.S. travel ban. She's saying she has vowed to do everything in support of those by the ban. Now, this has not only provoked a negative reaction among the German people, but also against one of her opposition leaders is threatening legal action, saying he'll take this all the way to the European Court of Justice. Merkel doesn't have these authorities to just give the country away. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. We're talking about this continuing firestorm over immigration. And again, Trump is using laws that date back 65 years in one case and to the previous administration in another. He didn't just pull this out of thin air. He does have these authorities to do this. And the illegal immigrants and the refugees are a strain on our already overstressed economy. Here in the United States of America, 91.4% of these refugees are on food stamps, 73.1% are on Medicaid, 68.3% are on cash assistance, and they are, of course, competing for jobs with legal American citizens. Now, CNN is still pushing the idea that this is a ban on Muslims. The word Muslim does not appear anywhere in Trump's executive order. It's a list of countries who are known hotbeds of terrorism. It's a list of countries that do not like the United States because prior administrations have been bombing and drone striking and regime changing these countries. So CNN is now out there saying that Trump's travel ban is preventing scientists and computer programmers from entering America, which sounds to me like CNN has just admitted Common Core has failed to educate Americans to be scientists and computer programmers. CNN just basically admitted our millennial population are not qualified for the high-tech global marketplace. And I'll bet you Trump will go after those H-1B visas, because we have a lot of college graduate Americans who are working in clothing stores and fast food restaurants while these H-1B visas come on in and take these jobs. Now, let's go ahead and take a phone call. Bob in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. This morning I made a number of phone calls to Washington, my congresswoman, my two senators, but my first call was to the office of Tulsi Gabbard.
Yes.
And I spoke to her representative, and I just wanted to thank her for all the work that she's done, praised her for her trip to Syria, and the young lady I spoke to, was very appreciative of that. But I also mentioned your show, and I said that you had been trying to get her on as a guest, and she was very interested in that, and she'd said, well, do you know if he contacted our press office? And I said, well, I'm not aware of that.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
And we tried a couple of other vectors, and I may be lost in the stack. I can almost imagine that right now Tulsi is fielding, a blizzard of requests for interviews. So I'm going to just sit and wait patiently, and hopefully, we'll be in touch soon.
Yeah, but that's an interview I would love to hear.
It's an interview I'd love to give.
Yeah, but I cannot stress enough the importance of citizens contacting our representatives and senators in Washington and just inundating them with phone calls and letting them know that we're here. And in fact, I did use that line with, I believe it was with the new Senator Cortez Masto, who's a Democrat, who took over the Harry Reid seat. And the guy I was speaking to, her representative, was this snot-nosed young guy with all these answers. He kept interrupting me. But I said, she doesn't work for Israel, she doesn't work for the military-industrial complex, and she doesn't work for Big Pharma. She works for the American people. So just let her know that. So
that's a good message to be sending in there. Absolutely.
We'll see what happens. You know, but Mike, I wanted to ask you also on the MiG-35, the Russian MiG-35.
Yes.
And other weapon systems that Russia deployed in Syria that performed so well. When Russia exports, when Russia sells these weapon systems to other countries, are they the same systems that the Russians use themselves, or are they minus certain, I don't know, certain...
Yeah, generally they'll be the domestic version for one's own military. Then there's the export version, which will have some of the capabilities reduced. Certain components will not be included. If you remember the big debate going back to Charlie Wilson's war, the U.S. was selling F-16s to this country, but refused to sell them the look-down, shoot-down radar systems, which really made them effective. Certainly, again, going back to that film, The Pentagon Wars, this guy who was in the Pentagon was pointing out all the problems on the Bradleys, and then all of a sudden he sees a line of Bradleys where the problems have been fixed, and they're saying, well, these are going to Israel. Israel wouldn't buy it without us making the changes. So, yeah, there are different versions. Plus, some countries will buy some of these weapons, and they'll add their own systems on board and try and improve that. Israel certainly did that with the F-16.
Yeah, I just wonder, I mean, the Russians have to know that if they do sell something to an ally of the U.S., that's going to be shared with the U.S., obviously.
Yes.
So they would sell them a system that's not, you know, but lastly, Mike, on George Soros, you know, I never hear George Soros criticizing or condemning these wars, because obviously he's for these wars, right? Because he wants to see these people, these countries destabilized, and these refugees being forced out into Europe and the U.S.
Yeah, and he wants to see all these countries. He wants to see all these countries have installed governments that are on board with this eventual one world government plan of his. And he's caused a huge amount of damage.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We're going to let you go. Yeah, basically when a country is exporting weapons, and the U.S. and Russia are exporting weapons, a lot of countries are, there's the ones they keep for themselves, and then there are the ones that are authorized for export. This is why you do not see any of the U.S. stealth aircraft authorized for export. Alrighty, now then, apparently California is considering enacting a statewide sanctuary. In other words, California is going to say federal immigration authorities have no power or cooperation anywhere inside the state of California. And you have to wonder what they're thinking over there, because California has something like 10% of all the illegals are in Southern California. And it does cause problems. When Claire and I still lived back there, it was causing all kinds of problems. There was, even back then, they were demanding that everything had to be in Spanish or at least 2 languages, and we see how well that worked out up in Canada. So, but they're saying, yeah, we're going to be a sanctuary. The refugees and illegal immigrants are coming on in. And, you know, at this point, I'm ready to say to California, go ahead, secede, and we'll just ship all of our refugees and illegal immigrants over to you and let you deal with this mess. Everybody is still out there screaming that this is all racist, racist, racist if you're opposed to illegal immigrants and refugees. Illegal is not a race. And I'll tell you what racism is. Racism is when you have a black unemployment rate that's double the national average and you still give the jobs to foreigners. That is racism. And I don't understand why the Black Lives Matter aren't screaming about that. Because when somebody hires an illegal immigrant or a refugee, it's going to impact the black labor pool much more seriously than any other. And they need to wake up and realize they're actually harming themselves on this. Now, last week, Starbucks pledged to employ 10,000 refugees worldwide, displacing their own indigenous workers, and immediately a global boycott has been called against Starbucks. People are getting angry out there. Latest Rasmussen poll, 47% of likely U.S. voters think the country is now heading in the right direction. This is the highest rating in 12 years, and it's shot up just 9% since last week. And the liberal crybabies are out there kneading their Play-Doh and rolling around on the floor and kicking and screaming, saying, "You don't love me." You're right, we don't. Now, there appears to be another vector for propaganda to be put on out that's going to damage Donald Trump. There's a story that came out of Government Slaves, and it's talking about how supposedly a rogue group of White House staffers are starting to tweet secrets from inside the White House. And it even goes as far as to admit there's no way to verify the authenticity of the newly minted Twitter channel. Now, at this point, given how much lies and fraud we are seeing coming out of the corporate media, the liberals, the establishment, and the rest of it, I'm dismissing this out of hand as likely being another way to try and say, oh, Donald Trump was cavorting with prostitutes in Moscow, and, you know, we saw the inside goods, and here you go. And Donald Trump is continuing to chastise justly the corporate media for saying this is a Muslim ban. And it isn't. It's a ban on all people of all religions from a specific list of countries. And Christians and Jews in those countries are not getting permission to travel to the U.S. Any more than the Muslims are. It is a ban on specific countries, not a religion. Now then, yesterday we had this story that was floating around, courtesy of the Washington Compost, where Donald Trump was considering an executive order that would reverse LGBT workers' protections. And once again, the White House is saying, this did not originate with us. The Washington Post claimed that they'd been given a draft of this executive order, and they ran with it because it makes Donald Trump look bad with the liberals. And remember, the Washington Compost, together with the New York Slimes, was also pushing that story that they had a draft executive order where Donald Trump was going to reinstate torture. And that's been denied by the White House. I mean, the corporate media is just out there just throwing headlines as fast as they can, hoping that people won't be paying attention when they have to retract it. ABC got caught because they were interviewing some of the people down that were inconvenienced by the travel ban, and they were talking to this guy from Iraq who was there with this very mournful-looking congresswoman. And he said, yeah, he loves America and everything. Somebody asked, how do you like Donald Trump? And he says, I love Donald Trump because he's trying to get rid of ISIS. ABC cut that part of it out. And over at CNN, the Daily Beast, rather, ran a story that was published on a labeled parody Twitter account. If you go to this Twitter account, it says Reuters breaking news parody. And they grabbed this story about the names of the suspects arrested up in Quebec, and they ran with it. They're not checking anything. They're just desperately out there searching for anything that pushes the agenda. And they're continuing to embarrass themselves. And unfortunately, we're at the point right now where we absolutely should not be paying attention to the Washington Compost or the New York Slimes anymore, because what we're getting from them is worse than fake news. We're getting junk. We're getting absolute junk. Now, over at NBC, Chuck Todd is now admitting that the corporate media was treating Hillary with kid gloves during this last election season. Wow, there's a breaking news headline for you. And then he goes on and he says, well, it was just political correctness and we didn't want to look sexist and we misjudged this. In other words, what they're trying to do is pull back and say, no, we didn't try and sell you the candidate. We just made some simple, honest mistakes and you should believe us and go back to trusting us. That will happen when the ice skating rinks start opening up in the dark regions. We're going to take a break for commercials and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And getting back to the point I made the other day when the corporate media was just behaving abominably toward Barron Trump. Hands off the kids. That's always been a prime rule. Even the mafia believes in that one. You take care of business, you don't go after the families. Over at BuzzFeed, one of their contributors, Natalie Shore, went public saying that Ivanka Trump's new baby Theodore sucks. And she's now set her account to private, but in the age of the internet, once it's out, it's out. It's not going to come back. Now, at this point, it looks like Donald Trump's short list for Supreme Court Justice is down to 2, and unfortunately Judge Napolitano is not on there. It's down to Denver's 10th Circuit Court of Appeals Judge Neil Gorsuch and Pittsburgh's 3rd Circuit Court of Appeals Justice Thomas Hardiman. They're both on their way to Washington, D.C., and that may just be to keep people guessing, but we are hearing from sources that Judge Neil Gorsuch is going to be the nominee. And he's going to be facing an uphill battle because we are seeing this story that's coming out of government slaves where Democratic senators are already out there saying, we're going to filibuster the Trump Supreme Court nominee just to prove we can do it. So, this is the most rancorous federal government I've ever seen. It's tearing itself apart. I'm glad that Donald Trump is in the White House, but I fear that we got him there way too late to change what is about to happen. Now, the State Department has been ordered to turn over 30 Clinton emails for review by a federal court judge. These were emails that previously were withheld from Judicial Watch's motion for partial summary judgment regarding its lawsuit on the email server. And these have been withheld under various privilege claims, and the judge has now said, I need to look at these to see if the privilege really applies or not. Now then, over at thehornnews.com, they have done something really amazing. They have gone out and they did searches in all 50 states looking for news stories about voter fraud, and they found voter fraud in all 50 states. This idea that it's only a few states and it's a small problem and it couldn't possibly be what Donald Trump says has now been absolutely shattered. And Horn News put up a list. It's on the front of WhatReallyHappened.com. Voter fraud uncovered in every state. And in many states they found multiple stories, but they just picked one and put it into the list. And every single state in the United States has problems. Dead people voting, people voting in multiple locations, outright fraud by the election system itself. Donald Trump is absolutely right in demanding a full investigation into the election system. And we, the American people, are well within our rights to demand a reliable, honest, transparent, verifiable election system, as opposed to our current system, which almost seems intentionally designed to facilitate and then conceal stolen elections. Well, Hillary and her people are still dancing around in circles trying to find a reason for her election loss without acknowledging the facts that nobody liked her and that she had all this political baggage. And, oh, it was the Russian hackers, it was this, it was that. Now they've settled on President Obama himself. He didn't do enough to get Hillary into the White House. He didn't work hard enough. Actually, he took pretty much the entire month of October off of his job, which is supposed to be working for the American people, and he was all over the country flying and campaigning and, you know, being seen with Hillary. He did an awful lot. He did more than probably he was allowed to do under the Hatch Act, to be very honest, but it's never enough for Hillary. It's never enough. And now they say, oh, it's Obama's fault, it's the Russian hackers, it's the independent media, it's this, it's that. No, you lost because nobody likes you. You lost because there are unanswered questions about Vince Foster, Travelgate, the email server, Chinagate. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, we've all been following over the last year these wonderful videos produced by Project Veritas, who have gone undercover and revealed the manipulation that was going on inside the DNC to favor Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders. And they've come out with a new one, which confirms that the liberal establishment is still out there playing their nefarious little games. So, in this latest video, one of the Project Veritas journalists is basically talking to some of these anti-Trump protest leaders about how they're organized, and is basically pretending to be a potential donor, saying, you know, what are you going to do with this money? And they're talking about organizing groups to shut down bridges and prevent people from showing up at the inauguration. And unfortunately, they realize that this lady is from Project Veritas, and they wind up trying to intimidate and harass her, which is a violation of her First Amendment rights as a citizen journalist. And just to show you how incredibly petty these people can be, story coming out of Oraz.com. There's a lady, Katie Richter, and she had some photos and memorabilia from Trump's inauguration, and she went into this Aspen, Colorado business suitable for framing to have them mounted. And she's talking to the clerk, the recommendations, and the clerk said, we can't help you. And she said, is it because of my political affiliation? And the clerk at this store, suitable for framing, said, yes. Now, this thing went wild on social media, and Suitable for Framing is now claiming that the only reason they couldn't frame the items is one of the photos had a crease that made it unsuitable for framing. And so at this point, we're seeing that Trump supporters, people who support the President of the United States of America, can be denied services at a picture frame shop that's owned by a Democrat. But if you refuse to bake a cake for a gay wedding, you will be sued. Can you say hypocrisy? I knew you could. And again, these liberals, Democrats, are not thinking very clearly. Heather Lowry of Louisville, Kentucky. And she's a lovely young lady. She works at a dancer in a burlesque theater. Not a strip joint, but burlesque was actually a specific art form. And she tweeted on out that somebody needed to assassinate Donald Trump. And this has resulted in her losing all of her jobs. She works at the burlesque show. She was listed at a modeling agency, and she also was working at a couple of part-time jobs, one in real estate and one in various other areas, and they've all fired her, saying we have a zero tolerance for that. And, of course, she's got the Secret Service coming down on top of her as well. Now, here is where you should have been paying attention in social studies. Freedom of speech was given to us, the American people, to protect the truth against government tyranny. The First Amendment is not intended to protect lies, nor does it protect threats of violence. And it is, in fact, a crime, a serious crime, to threaten the life and limb of a sitting president, or for that matter, the incoming president. You're not supposed to do that. And all these people all over Twitter who are just going wacko with all this, oh, he's got to be assassinated, he's got to be... They're all committing crimes that they could wind up going to jail for. So it's time to tone this rhetoric down. Because if anything does happen to Donald Trump, it's probably going to trigger a civil war, and I don't think any of us really want that. Except the defense contractors who will make a lot of money out of it. And I'm not the only person who's saying that, because over at Investment Watch blog, they had a story. We're literally on the verge of either greatness or destruction. Two paths into the future, making America great again or descending into tyranny and civil war. And it is the liberal left, the Democrats, who are pushing us toward the abyss. Now let's turn over to the war zones here, because apparently over the weekend, 2,600 militants laid down their arms in Syria's Wadi Bardi Valley, which supplies Damascus with drinking water. And so Damascus now has control over their own drinking water again. The earlier reports of poisoning may not have been accurate as well. And ISIS, of course, is now behaving like a spoiled child, because satellite photos are showing that ISIS has blown up the tetrapylon and seriously damaged the Roman theater in Palmyra. Now, these are designated UNESCO World Heritage Site. And they've just gone on in there and just destroyed it. And all because the U.S. government wanted to replace Assad. And all because Assad didn't want to allow a pipeline so that Israel could steal oil stolen from under the Golan and sell it to Europe. All of this death and destruction from greed. Aleppo residents are now out there saying that for all the talk from the U.S. government about wanting to care about the civilians of Syria, the only actual humanitarian aid is coming from Russia and Syria. All the U.S. is doing is continuing to send in weapons. Now, the other day, there was talk that Donald Trump wanted to set up some refugee-safe zones. And the corporate media spun it that, oh, yes, we're going to go on in, we're going to invade Syria. And the misreporting by the corporate media resulted in very hostile reactions from Russia and Syria, especially Syria. And then they started talking, saying, well, maybe, maybe, maybe. It turns out Donald Trump has set up 6 refugee-safe zones in Saudi Arabia. He got Saudi Arabia to say, yes, we'll set up safe zones so the refugees don't have to go to Europe. They don't have to come to the United States of America. They just walk across the border, a much shorter distance, much easier trip for them to take. Get them out of the way while Trump goes after ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Now, as you know, Trump has started going after Al-Qaeda in Yemen, or what he thinks is Al-Qaeda in Yemen, and some civilians were caught in that. And it's rather interesting because it's amazing when you look at all the civilians that were being killed with Obama's drone strikes and raids. The corporate media's attitude was, nah, who cares? And they're making a big deal over the fact that civilians were reportedly killed in this U.S. raid against Al-Qaeda in Yemen. But you need to keep something important in mind. Al-Qaeda and ISIS deliberately keep themselves surrounded by civilians. They're using these people as human shields. And yes, civilians are being killed. And civilians are being killed because these wars were started by the United States government over propping up the U.S. dollar internationally. Remember when General Wesley Clark came on out and said there was this plan to conquer all these Middle East nations. It was a deliberate, aggressive, unprovoked war, both overt and covert, by the United States against these countries. And everything that has happened since then, all the death, destruction, the civilians being killed, the hospitals being bombed, all goes back to that U.S. policy. We know who the aggressor is in this world today, and it is certainly not Russia. Now, the other day, as you know, Donald Trump gave a statement for Holocaust Remembrance Day where he talked about the innocent victims. And, of course, Israel just immediately started screaming, no, 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 the Holocaust is always to be discussed of solely in terms of the Jews and Jewish suffering and anti-Semitism, and how dare you just not mention that. And as we pointed out, the historical reality is that the Jews were not the only occupants of those Nazi slave labor camps. They weren't even the majority. The Nazis put anybody they felt was inferior, either racially or politically, into those slave labor camps to manufacture goods for the Nazi army. And they put the gays in there, they put mentally retarded people in there, gypsies in there, they put in the social democrats, they put in the communists. There were a lot of people in there, and Donald Trump was correct to be inclusive in saying all of the people who suffered in those slave labor camps. Now then, I'm reminding you of that because Donald Trump has now come on out and told Fox News it is way too early to talk about moving the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He was out there telling his Jewish supporters what they wanted to hear, but Trump is saying it's too soon, we're not going to talk about it. And between this and the brouhaha over Holocaust Remembrance Day, it's looking to me like Trump is not quite as cozy with Israel as some people thought he might be. Now, going over to Russia and Ukraine, Poroshenko is convening what's called the Contact Group Emergency Session. Apparently, Ukraine's forces have shelled the Donetsk People's Republic territory 1,912 times over the past 24 hours. That's a heavy, heavy bombardment. Apparently, Ukraine was also trying to attack Novorossiya and lost about 150 people in that particular venture. Still trying to get that war with Russia going. It's amazing here. And again, the pettiness of just trying to provoke them. As you know, next year is the Winter Olympic Games, 2018, and the Russian Paralympians they've been banned from the qualifiers, which begin basically this winter. This is the winter when they go on out and they win their nationals and get themselves positioned to be on the Olympic teams. And the Russian Paralympians, and we're talking about people on crutches and in wheelchairs and stuff, they're barred from the qualifiers. Just to flip Russia the finger in one more way here. Now, U.S. and Polish soldiers have now manned all this newly delivered American military hardware, and they're conducting joint drills, supposedly to ensure that the unlikely attack from the east is even more unlikely, which is a very polite way of saying, we understand Russia isn't going to attack, but we're going to stand here and fend them off anyway. It's like standing in the intersection of Main Street with a shotgun saying, I'm keeping away the wild elephants. There's no wild elephants for thousands of miles around here. See, it works. That's the thinking there. And unfortunately, it's not going as smoothly. Apparently, there have been a large number of accidents involving this military hardware. In one case, a truck broke down and literally dumped a bunch of ammunition for the main armament on the M1 Abrams tank onto the roadway. Got everybody rattled on that one. So they're having trouble staying on the roads over there. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, I hope they have a buffer on the west because the Polish might make a U-turn and head west instead.
Well, you know, Poland just recently acknowledged that they have been thinking about moving closer to Russia anyway, starting from like about 2 years ago.
But they're controlled by globalists.
Yeah, they're controlled.
If you look at the population, well, go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the globalists are calling all of this stuff. The ordinary people of Europe, the ordinary people of Russia, and the ordinary people of the United States of America do not want any more war. We have been at war with somebody, you know, for almost 20 years now. And it really is getting a little bit out of control.
Hey, Mike, on Russia, with the you had that previous caller about different weapon systems. Yeah, you have an international version and a domestic version. Obviously, you're not going to give them the full version because if it gets captured, it'll be backward engineered. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And on the MiG-35, that's a derivative of the MiG-29, which is a great airplane. It's updated, and it's going to be in service in 3 years.
Yes.
So by 2020, that will be. It's a great airplane. There's a new video anybody wants to check out on YouTube from January, and it's a great airplane, great capabilities. It's not as great as the Su-35 the Russians have, but it's good.
But it's going to be a lot less expensive.
Exactly. And that's where you want. You know, I'd rather have 10 cheaper planes than one expensive plane because 10 is going to always outnumber one, you know?
Well, yeah, and, you know, a lot of people think, you know, providing a target-rich environment here. But when we were in Vietnam, of course, the U.S. was talking about the kill ratio, which is for every one of our aircraft that were shot down, 4 enemy aircraft were being shot down. But Russia was providing something like 8 to 10 aircraft for every single U.S. airplane sent over because Russia was building these incredibly inexpensive, very simple to fly, very easy to train the pilots, and they were basically, well, as you know, the U.S. lost in Vietnam.
And on the stealth aircraft, I don't know why anybody would want a stealth aircraft. Of course, they can be shot down with a late 40s, early 50s radar with low band frequency.
Well, that was something that was something you weren't supposed to know. That was the big secret about, stealth only worked for a very narrow range of radar frequencies, and they were designed to deal with these ultra-high frequency targeting radars. But yeah, they do show up on these lower VHF search radars, and if you can guide an aircraft into its neighborhood with a low-frequency radar, if they get eyeballs on the target, that target is gone, because none of these stealth aircraft are really all that maneuverable.
And Mike, remember back in World War II, the Germans had that experimental, remember they had the wire-guided missile? Was it on the ME-262s, I believe? I think it was a missile, but it was wire-guided, so they had the wire was like a couple hundred or 1,000 feet long. I don't know how long the wire is, but that's what they used early on because, they didn't have the technology for wire, obviously infrared.
Yeah, well, I mean, even the U.S. Was using wire-guided missiles for a while. I mean, a lot of anti-tank weapons are still wire-guided. And but in the case of Nazi Germany, I'm not sure about that because they weren't able to, like, put a TV camera in the nose of the missile, so it was kind of hit or miss from the point of view of the pilot. The main advantage of the ME-260... All right, I'll hold you over.
Well, thanks a lot, Mike.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're still talking with Dustin in New Jersey, and I found this wire-guided air-to-air missile. It was called the Ruhrstahl X4. It was never actually deployed in combat, and so they never got around to using it. But it did inspire copycats in other countries after the war was over. That is one of the interesting things about German military technology. They developed and invented a lot of stuff that they weren't able to deploy. In addition to the ME-262, which was the world's first jet fighter, they had rocket-powered airplanes like the Comet, and those fuels eventually became the fuels used to power Apollo, because Werner von Braun brought them over with him. The Germans even had a radar-invisible aircraft, but they spent so much money developing this technology, they didn't have enough money left over to actually build them in any significant numbers, which is a mistake we're seeing the United States military make right now.
And I think that plane was probably only have a one-way trip.
Which plane was that?
I think it was going to be the one that was supposed to be stealthy and a bomber. I think it was only had enough fuel for one way.
That strikes me as kind of reckless. I don't think that's accurate. I think it didn't have a lot of range, but they certainly intended for it to come back and be used over and over again.
Unless the Japanese got a hold of it. It would be a kamikaze.
Well, yeah, but the kamikaze aircraft were just these very flimsy things because they were designed to be used once, throw away, and they were basically towed out over the American fleet and just cut loose like they were basically a glider, a piloted glider, with a bomb in the nose of it, and they'd get the pilots good and juiced up on tea and opium before they'd do their missions.
Hey, Mike, on Trump, wouldn't it be great if he did take... People need to realize you can't get rid of the Federal Reserve, like not right away. You have to do what the Russians did and, privatize it because it would just add too much turmoil. Now, if Trump privatized the Federal... That would go a long way into helping this country. But if you think the protests are bad now, they would go all out when he did that. It'd be like the gloves would come off, I believe.
It certainly would, and of course, Putin didn't actually take ownership of Russia's central bank. It's still owned by its private owners. What Putin did was to take control of the bank to manage Russia's public currency as a public utility, and that was when Russia went from being this good friend and partner to being at the top of the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list. And the same thing is probably already happening with regards to Trump because he's definitely not under the control of the elites. He has really shaken up the place, which is what we elected him to do. Yeah, I agree that the best thing that he could do, and may be forced to do when the economy does take its tumble, which seems inevitable, is to take control of the Federal Reserve and the money supply by the U.S. government for the American people. All right, Dustin, we're going to let you go. Take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, last week we were reporting where Germany's army was alarmed because their recruitment numbers are way, way low. And so now Germany is proposing that they be allowed to recruit for the German army from other member states of the European Union. So this may be an attempt to covertly build an EU army without actually calling it that. Because we know that was proposed about a month ago, and all the member states of the European Union said, no, we've got our own military. We don't need a grand army under the control of Brussels to slap us around if we're misbehaving. But now Germany is seriously talking about building up the German army with members of citizens of the other European Union nations. Meanwhile, Germany is launching a program to train refugees in basic work skills like welding and construction to try and free up more Germans to join the military. If you had a vetted immigration program, then your country would already have all these people coming in who have these skills and don't need to be trained up. Now, there's a Chinese army commander who's basically saying that war with the U.S. is an increasing reality we need to look at. They're blaming Trump's protectionist stance, the possibility of a trade war, which could in turn lead to an actual physical combat between the two countries. Obviously, we'd like to avoid that. North Korea is looking at another test ballistic missile launch, and this one will be an intermediate range rather than a long-range missile. But, of course, everybody's out there screaming, how dare you build rockets? How dare you do this? How dare you do that? Iran is apparently carrying out or has carried out another test of their missiles, which supposedly in the wake of the Iran P5+1 deal, the United Nations Security Council passed a resolution calling on Iran to suspend testing of military missiles. But from Iran's point of view, the United States never kept up their side of the P5+1 deal. They didn't ease the sanctions. In fact, they put more sanctions on there. The war hawks are screaming for even more sanctions. And the attitude coming out of Washington, D.C. has been, well, yes, Iran is complying with the P5+1, but they're not doing it fast enough. They're not subservient enough. And so they're still talking about war, and unfortunately, at least for the moment, they have Donald Trump convinced that Iran is this horrible, horrible enemy that is coming to get us. But again, history tells you what's really going on. Iran has not initiated a war of conquest against another country in over 200 years, and certainly not since the Iranian Revolution of 1979, which was all about kicking out the imposed U.S. puppet ruler, the Shah. All right, I'm going to go ahead and take one phone call from Wes in Idaho. Wes, keep it short. What's on your mind?
Yeah, your statement a couple days ago about we need carbohydrates and starches. Do you know of a man named Bilgemer Stephenson, a Harvard?
Okay, Wes, when the rules of the show are when you call on in, you're talking about what we're talking about. Okay.
Yeah, I tried to call last week when you were talking.
All right, I tried to be nice and everything. Bye-bye. All right. Put him back on the ban list. There are, unfortunately, too many people who like to just hear their voice on the radio. What does carbohydrates have to do with what we're talking about here? Now then, Abe Foxman used to be the head of the ADL, and he's still out there championing Israel's causes all across the country. And he came out with a very interesting observation, saying that there is a continuous crisis between American Jews and Israel over fundamental differences in values. and basically acknowledged that if peace were to come to Israel, that financial support by American Jews would probably fall off. So in order to keep on extracting this wealth from American Jews and the American taxpayer in general, Israel needs to always be seen as being threatened by Palestine, by Syria, by Egypt, by whoever they can come up with. Abe Foxman is essentially saying that Israel is maintaining hostility with its neighbors because it's profitable for them. And I think that needs to stop. Now then, not too surprisingly, tourism to Israel is not doing all that well. And this last year they mounted a major marketing blitz with a lot of cute girls and just trying to lure people in there, and it really didn't work. Which is hardly surprising because you see a commercial, come and visit Israel. And by the way, if they didn't hate us so much, I'd like to see the antiquities in Israel someday. But it's not likely to happen. But at the same time, you see these commercials, come and visit us in Israel, and you get the corporate media saying, oh, Israel is under threat from this and that, and nuclear weapons, and Iran is going to destroy them. So, of course, the tourism is going to suffer. Anytime you have nations at war, tourism tends to fall off. Another reason I'd like to avoid a war here, because our tourism here in Hawaii is already suffering much hardship from TSA. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now then, earlier in the program we were talking about how the initial blame for the mosque shooting up in Quebec was placed on a couple of white supremacists when somebody posted some names to what is labeled as a parody account on Twitter. And it was picked up and run as real news. And everybody said, oh, it's white supremacists, it's Islamophobia and everything. Well, now it's been revealed the true identity of the shooter. There was only one, Alexander Bissonnette, and apparently he's very pro-Israel. So it wasn't white supremacy, and it wasn't Islamophobia. All right, so let's talk about the economic news. If you've been watching TV today, you know that the stock market is taking a bit of a stumble. Not bad enough to jump out the window, even if you could open the windows on Wall Street these days. But it's noticeable. It's a noticeable downturn. Now, yesterday we were reporting on how the Dow had topped 20,000, yet all of the companies that make up the Dow Jones Industrials had reported declining earnings since 2010. They've been slipping and slipping all the way, which underscored the fact that the stock market is still being manipulated by the plunge protection team in order to use it as a political banner. And the problem with that is everybody now knows that's what's going on. Now, Harry Dent over at Investment Watch blog is saying stocks could conceivably fall 70 to 90% within the next 3 years. Of course, he says that's a good thing because it's the buying opportunity of a lifetime for anybody who actually has any money to invest in the stock market. But that is a major, major hit to the equities market. And somewhere along the way, of course, there'll be panic buying of silver and gold, if it's still legal for Americans to own silver and gold. We're rapidly being corralled into a position of complete fiscal helplessness by the bankers here. Over in the European Union, their banks are crumbling under a almost 1 trillion with a T pound sterling bad debt. They've got toxic loans all over the place there. Another one of these banks got caught cooking the books with weird deals to try and not have to report how much bad debt they're holding. And the scale of the EU's banking problem has become urgent and actionable, according to Andrea Enria, the chairman of the European Banking Authority. In other words, that 11th marble has come home to roost. Now, in the past, I have often described the European Union's finances as a wooden boat with 10 holes in the bottom and only 9 corks. And everything they try and do to deal deal with the out-of-control debt amounts to yanking a cork from one hole and pounding it into another hole in full view of the media cameras saying, I'm working on the problem. But the water, the debt, still pours on in, and ultimately the boat and the economy must sink. And all of this goes back to that fatal flaw in the model of private central banking, which is private central banks, by design, create more debt than money with which to pay that debt. The instant that first pretty printed piece of paper goes into circulation, more money is owed to that private central bank than actually exists. It doesn't matter how hard you work, it doesn't matter how much you sacrifice, you can never get out of that debt. It is designed that way to trap you as a debt slave for the rest of your life. Another story over at Investment Watch blog. Economic indicators show clear signs the economy is slipping into a depression. And everybody is being forced to overspend. Here in America, people are having to... credit is no longer an option. People are literally having to use their credit just to survive. Pay their rent, buy food, pay their medical bills. Right now, the U.S. is dealing with the lowest growth rate in 5 years. Now, to understand the importance of the growth rate, when they're talking about the growth of the U.S. economy, they're talking about the total aggregate indebtedness. Because the way the private central bank Ponzi scheme works is that you're always growing the economy, you're increasing borrowing in order to have ample new money, part of which is taken away and used to pay the interest on the old money. That's why it's a pyramid. Each new generation has to have a larger pool of people who are forced to borrow money to justify the creation of money, part of which is used to pay the interest on the existing money. That's what carries the whole thing forward. And this is what causes wars, because it's a horrible three-step process. A country is enslaved to a private central bank, and they start issuing all the public currencies at loan at interest, and the public debt starts to go up until finally ordinary people reach their debt limit. They're working as hard as they can just to make the interest payments, and they stop borrowing. At that point, the Keynesian economists come on in and say the government has to start borrowing on behalf of the people, and I might add without their permission, to keep that little debt pyramid scheme going. And so the government borrows and borrows and borrows until it can't borrow anymore, which is the situation we're in right now. And that's when the bankers will start the wars, because wars force governments to borrow more. And when it's all over, they loan the money to fight the war, they loan the money to rebuild from the war, and when this scam is all over, ordinary people like you and I, we have more or less what we started out with, except our graveyards are a lot bigger, and we are back on the debt hook to the bankers for another 100 years. That's how it works. That's how these private central banks have kept the human race enslaved for 300 years. And we need to realize it is a system of enslavement. That's why the private central bankers worked so hard to destroy the economic system the United States was started with. Because it was an economic system that freed the United States and the American people from the slavery of Europe's bankers. The American Revolution was primarily fought to free us from the Bank of England. You're not taught that in school anymore, not since 1913, because the smart kids would figure out we're back in that same system. Now, down in Virginia, their House voted 99-0 to pass a bill that removes sales taxes from purchases of gold and silver. And they're trying to basically encourage the citizens of Virginia to get into gold and silver, possibly to use it as currency, and to bypass the Federal Reserve. Because when you look at that pretty printed piece of paper, the U.S. Federal Reserve note, and it says on the front, this note is legal tender for all debts public and private. The word that is not there, the Federal Reserve would like it to be there, but it isn't, is the word only. Currency can be whatever two trading parties agree to use as a medium of exchange. There's no law that says you must use the Federal Reserve note. And during economic hardships, communities have set up and used their own currency. It happened during the Civil War when the Union was counterfeiting the Confederate dollar to try and destroy it. A lot of towns just created their own currency. It happened again during the Depression of the 1930s. It's probably going to be happening here in the United States during the coming downturn. Now then, over in Germany, they're taking Donald Trump to task. This appeared in Der Spiegel. Basically chastising Donald Trump, saying he has no interest in existing trade deals or the basic rules of economics, and what a dangerous cocktail it is for German industry. So basically, Germany is taking the position that putting America first, that wanting to employ all Americans and rebuild our factories, is a form of economic aggression. It's amazing. Now, Saudi Arabia is in serious economic trouble. They got absolutely hammered by this poorly thought out oil price war that was directed against Russia. And yes, it did hurt Russia, but Russia's economy was a lot more resilient than people were hoping. Saudi Arabia really got hammered. They fell behind on payments. They're having to issue bonds. They're starting to sink into debt. And because of Saudi Arabia's oil wealth, the Saudi citizens, up until recently, enjoyed a tax-free society. They didn't pay taxes. Just like the first Americans. There were no taxes on the people. And that has now changed. They're introducing a value-added tax. Because when governments fail, the first thing they do is start taking money away from the people. We are hearing that the Wall Street Journal is starting to lay off employees at their bureaus in Asia and Europe because of their declining readership and their declining advertising. Sears is having one of the worst months in its entire history. They've lost 30% of the value of their stock in just the last 4 days. And again, if you pile all the money up at the very, very tippy top, and ordinary people don't have money, they're not going to go into the stores. I mean, the banks are out there saying, use your credit card, use your MasterCard. That's how the system works. You need to be a patriot, bury yourself in debt. Americans are trying to get out of debt. They're trying to pay down their credit cards. They're trying to pay off their car loans because they're scared right now at what is coming. And every time you pay off another credit card or you close out another loan, you are breaking another one of the links in that slave chain of debt created for you by private central banks. Even Ron Paul is out there saying there's going to be a dollar crash and Donald Trump can't stop it, and I'm afraid I'm in agreement with Ron Paul. I'm happy we got Trump into the White House, but I fear it's too late. This economic downturn has been building for a very, very, very long time. It's going back 30 years. And we can count on the corporate media to blame Donald Trump for the crash, just like they did Herbert Hoover in the 1930s. But Herbert Hoover did not create the Depression of the 1930s. It was created for him. The same applies today. There's a major economic upheaval about to happen. They're going to blame it on Trump, but Trump's only been the president for a little over a week. But that won't stop the corporate media from saying, oh, yes, we told you to vote for Hillary. We told you to vote for Hillary. Now, getting on over to Europe, they're still trying to find some way to undo the Brexit vote. The globalists are still out there. And now the latest wrinkle is coming from the Republic of Ireland, which is saying that Britain's departure from the EU is going to affect Irish trade and freedom of movement, and they're now demanding that Ireland should get a vote over whether Britain be allowed to leave the European Union or not. These globalists are getting desperate. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Okay, we're talking about the Brexit here, and we want to do a little bit of a flashback to David Cameron when they were first announcing they were going to have the referendum, when he promised the in-out referendum. And he said he was going to renegotiate Britain's relationship with the EU and then give people the simple choice between staying in under the new terms or leaving the EU. Cameron said the British people. Cameron didn't mention Parliament. Cameron didn't mention civil servants. Cameron didn't mention Britain's Supreme Court, nor corporations, nor Brussels, nor Ireland. Nothing. It was the will of the people, is the law of the land, and they've made their choice. And it's rather disgusting to see how the globalists are trying to basically say, oh, no, 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 no. Once you are slaves of the New World Order, you will never leave. Apparently, the EU has jacked up the price for Britain to leave the European Union. And they're now saying that Britain will have to pay the European Union £500 billion for the EU's permission to leave. All right, let's grab some phone calls here. Kyle in Pennsylvania, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Question for you on the economy. If it were to take another major downturn, as we saw in 2008, do you think that Trump would be strong enough to do what Iceland did to the bankers? And second of all, could that threat of Trump doing that be enough to keep the bankers from calling their debt?
I don't know that the two are necessarily linked. I think Trump is definitely going to be strong enough to say, look, if you broke the law, if you committed fraud, you are going to jail. And he certainly would not be amenable to looting the American people to prop up the banks after a goof like that. And I think we need to see some of these crooked bankers in prison. Okay, but as far as blocking the banks from calling in the debt, I don't know that there's a legal way to do that short of declaring a national emergency. But
that's what I'm saying. I'm saying would the threat of him taking the Icelandic solution be enough for them to to question whether or not it would be advantageous for them to do it?
Well, see, here's the problem. If Trump could find the fraudulent bankers and Wall Street people, and he could toss them in prison, but that would have no effect on all the other banks that were put into financial trouble by the crash, calling in their debts because they themselves directly did not participate in the fraud. So I think there would have to be, I think it was Richard Nixon did a wage and salary freeze and just put a lock on this thing while they try and work it on out. But yeah, and this is why I've been saying for years to all of our listeners: get out of debt. Get out of that debt, because when it all comes apart, the poor are always made to pay for all the sins of the rich.
Well, and from what I understand, there's already, and I don't know if he's not even around anymore, but Webster Tarpley back in 2009 had a fantastic solution to any financial crisis involving a central bank. It basically came out to nationalizing the bank, releasing about $1.4 trillion worth of interest-free money into circulation for large work problems, while also at the same time mitigating any sort of illegitimate debt, fraudulent debt. And it would take some time, but it would avoid any sort of dramatic recession. If Trump could do that, I mean, there's an out.
Well, I mean, technically, Congress can rescind the charter of the Federal Reserve anytime they want to, and we don't know what Trump thinks he's capable of doing, but what would really solve it is a jubilee, where all the debt is simply declared null and void and invalid, and the private central banks are shut down, and we go back to the system that the United States started with. Of course, those private central bankers have got a huge amount of the world's wealth, and they're not willing to let go. It's like a bunch of vampires out there. Anyway, Kyle, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to take another phone call. Mo in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Thank you for taking my call. I would just like to get your insight on something, if you don't mind. I'll just try to be brief, but I think the biggest, I'm trying to stay on topic. I know you got on the economy, but to me, the biggest issue with Trump, I know it is the economy, but everything, you know, like you say, revolves around the banksters or,
yes,
you know, these crooks. But, you know, I know, like even, it was the last year, Alex Jones had on Steve Pachenik, you know, and he got very uncomfortable. You know, thou doth protest too much. When Steve Pachenik mentioned that it was, you know, Israel, Saudis, the neocons that did 9/11. Anybody that really investigates it, listens to your show and does their own investigation, comes down to those, like you say, those are the ones that had something to gain. Well, I know Trump knows this. He has to know it. Everything I read says, you know, knows what's going on for a long time. But how can that? I think that's why how can he ever confront Israel on this issue? Because that would be the end of him. If the Mossad was, you know, he can't separate the Israeli government from the Israeli people like we do. You know.
Well, you know, I got to be very honest. I got to be very honest here. 9/11 is fading into history. We all know what happened, and I am not expecting, I'm not even asking Donald Trump to look at 9/11 because we have very pressing matters going on today, of which obviously the economy is a big one, because I don't think Trump is fully prepared for what's going to happen.
But he threatened to reopen it. You know, he said he would.
Oh, well, that was on the campaign, and he also said he was going to move the American embassy to Jerusalem, and now he's pulling back on that one. You know, I'm not going to hold Trump to all of his campaign promises, just to the ones that are important. And I understand a lot of people would like another official U.S. government investigation into 9/11, but it's just a waste of time. It's a chance for all of the perpetrators who are still in positions of power to try and polish up the lies. We all know what happened, okay? And I do not cede to any government authority the power to tell me whether I'm right or wrong in my own conclusions. So we know what happened on 9/11. We got snookered, just like the U.S. government has done so many other times, Lusitania, Pearl Harbor, USS Maine, all the rest of that stuff. It was just another in a long line of huge hoaxes to trick us into war. Sadly, it worked rather too well. And now we're stuck in all of these wars that were born on 9/11, and we can't get out of them, and we can't win them. And now we're hearing that the Pentagon is now modernizing and updating their plans for possible nuclear strikes on Russia and China. I mean, this thing is spinning completely out of control.
Yeah, I see your perspective. That's why I call and that's why I listen to your show. I don't totally agree with you, but I do see your perspective. Thanks, Michael.
All right, well, thank you, too. And if you ever totally agreed with me, I would advise you to seek therapy right away here. I don't expect all of you to agree with everything I say. One of the reasons you're here at this show is you are all independent thinkers and analysts, and you're learning how to trust your own mind, and that's a good thing. That's what I wanted to have happen. So I know you're not going to agree with everything I say, and that is just fine with me. All right, we're going to switch over to Dennis in Florida. Aloha, Dennis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me okay?
Are you going to sell me a timeshare condo?
I'm not that clever or that deceive. No. I don't have that mentality. I just want to, first of all, I appreciate everything, your hard work and what you do. Your passion is just incredible. I'm in that group that doesn't agree with everything, but I do applaud your passion, and most of what you say I just absolutely agree with and love. And you touched on the economy and the banks, and that's my hot button. To me, that's just the linchpin of everything. The control that the Federal Reserve has and the private banking system that they have is just, if we can somehow conquer that would be, you know,
well, it may take a repeat of the American Revolution to do, because that was what the American Revolution was really about, breaking free from the slavery of a private central bank.
Yes. Now, here's my question. Donald Trump, the president, if they decide to pull the plug on the economy with whatever means, raising interest rates, whatever they may have up their sleeve, what's his power? What's his power as president to fight back? Is it what JFK did, trying to print honest money, United States money, or what do you think he would do?
Well, Donald Trump does have the authority to order the Treasury Department to issue a new United States currency, as Kennedy did, which was one of the reasons.
How would that go? How would that go if he did that, though? How would that competitive currency, how would that play out, do you think?
Well, it was like the earlier caller who said we need to dump a whole bunch of interest-free money into circulation, which is exactly what Kennedy did. His United States notes were out in circulation, powering commerce, and without accruing interest to the central bank. So the economy was allowed to grow, become more active and dynamic without the Federal Reserve skimming such a thick chunk off the top of it. And Trump certainly has that within his authority to do, just like Abraham Lincoln did. And that might be the first most legal step that he can do. And then beyond that, and you're right, we're already hearing from Janet Yellen that the Federal Reserve is going to start raising rates in order to hamstring Donald Trump and paralyze him from being able to accomplish any substantive change. But at what point does the economy become enough of a problem where Trump is justified in using the existing executive orders which allow him to declare a national emergency and take control of the financial institutions in the event of a crisis? See,
now you're talking.
That's the wild card that's out there, because over the years since Nixon, there are all these executive orders that have accumulated that allow the president to assume all kinds of authority in the event of a declared national emergency. And an economic crisis is on the list of events that would allow the president to basically activate these additional powers. And so at the point where the economy is crashing and everybody's in trouble, Trump, on the basis of the executive orders issued by his predecessors, could declare a national emergency and take direct control of the economic system.
If he is a true maverick and independent from this deep state that controls everything, that's the route he should take, right? If that would be the indicator.
That would, well, he's definitely a maverick, and he's definitely annoying the deep state. But the issue is, how much harm are we going to cause in our attempt to make things better? Is it really the best possible option? It's an option. Is it the best possible option? So we'll see what Trump is going to do, but certainly it is within his legal authority to order the U.S. Treasury to start issuing an interest-free U.S. currency.
Well, that's why Kennedy went away, I think. But one more point before I let you go. I know you got a lot of callers.
Yeah.
These people and I appreciate their opinion as far as Canadians calling about opinions and what they did in Iceland. You can't compare those situations. Canada has the population of California. I got a lot of Canadian friends that tell me this and that. I'm saying, you got the population of California. It's like trying to watch one child compared to 100 children. There's just no comparison. You can't. The same solutions won't work for them and us.
Well,
we go back to state
that's
control,
certainly true, but I don't.
I
I think we're looking at Canada not in terms of its bulk population, but in terms of a parallel economic political structure, and how similar are we determines whether a solution that works for Canada might work here. But I think there's no question that if the United States were to start enforcing the existing laws against financial fraud against these Wall Street players, that we would see a lot of these problems go away. But we may be back in the same situation Roosevelt was in, where after discovering the plan for a coup d'etat by the Wall Street bankers just sat back and said, you arrest any one of us, we'll crash your New Deal economy and make sure the media blames you for it. And Donald Trump may be looking at that same reality where he'd like to start arresting these fraudulent bankers, and the rest of Wall Street is saying, if you arrest any one of us, we'll crash the economy and make sure that you get the blame. So these money junkies play for keeps.
And that's where he goes to the fireside chat and just becomes completely open to the American public and tries and obviously incorporates our help to help him do whatever he plans on doing. I mean, I don't know what that may be exactly, but I have faith, I have optimism, and that's enough right now. So, Mike, I really appreciate all you do, and best of everything to you and Claire. Thanks.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to switch over to Nick in California. Aloha, Nick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I was calling about glyphosate and vaccine. I had sent you an email. It was supposed to have a YouTube video link in there, but I forgot. I resent it to you. You were looking for that. And I think that what's really interesting about it, it's an MIT professor, Dr. I want to say it's Steffens. I'm not looking right at it. And one of the biggest points, and there are so many in this hour and a half, is that these vaccines are kind of aiming at these specific pathogens. And because they aim at those specific pathogens, it ruins our body's ability to actually kind of have a generalized way of fighting these other pathogens.
It actually does.
That's like a very small point.
It does weaken your overall immune system the more vaccines you get. And there was that study that was done recently where they were surveying homeschool children and had enough unvaccinated children to be able to make some statistical studies. And they found the unvaccinated children were overall much healthier than the kids who'd gone through the mandatory vaccine regimen. And the gentleman you're talking about is Anthony Samsel, and he was working with an activist group. No, different guy?
No, that is not. This is a female, and she's an MIT researcher. And basically, you know, I'll resend it to you, and I'll, you know, so you can look at it. There's a lot of information. She predicted that there would be glyphosate in vaccines, but I think that you reported it was found in vaccines within the last month or two. Did you report that?
Yeah, I did. Anthony Samsel. Actually, it was found all the way back in September. Dr. Anthony Samsel and was working with the group Moms Across America, and they confirmed the presence of glyphosate in the DTaP vaccine, a flu vaccine, a hepatitis B vaccine, and a pneumococcal vaccine. They all had detectable levels of glyphosate, which, by the way, is a probable carcinogen according to the World Health Organization. So they're literally ordering you to have your child injected with something that could give them cancer. Oh, look, the cancer treatment companies are going to be having really good profits and all the. We have a medical system that needs us all to be chronically ill in order to harvest more wealth from us.
Well, you might find also interesting, and I know you'll probably let me go here shortly, but what's also interesting is the studies they do on these pathogens, these poisons in the body, these toxins.
Yes.
They tend to do the studies of one toxin at a time, but glyphosate actually has a synergistic effect with other toxins in the body. So
yes.
Watch the video. I think you're going to find it worth the hour and a half.
Yeah, that is why there was such a problem with the triple dose, the MMR vaccine. Because they took all of these adjuvants and all these other things. They've never been tested for contraindications of being administered at the exact same time. And if you go back and you look at the documentary Vax, they're specifically calling attention to the fact that the kids who get the combined triple vaccine are far more likely to get autism than the kids who got the measles, mumps, and rubella spread out over time. And what happened was the single-dose vaccines for measles, mumps, and rubella were taken off the market. So you had no choice but to have the MMR vaccine to satisfy the legal requirements. It really is a very messed-up system, and it is harming people.
Yeah, my mom actually is. My mom's been really, really polite. She sells the flu vaccine as part of her, her business, and she's actually. Well, I don't want to reveal anybody's names or anything, but let's just say that, I was asking her, I said, are we not able to get these individually? She told me the story. Sounds like you already know it. I guess in Northern Europe, what they started to do was they started to spread all of the vaccines out over time because they found that, the children were getting sick otherwise. So
yes.
It's obvious, and I don't understand why the public is just not listening. I don't get it.
They're starting to listen. They're starting to listen. You can even see the signs of panic over at CDC and Monsanto. They're out there saying, it's all fake news that we're selling medicines that make you sick. And the more they scream, the more people are starting to say, whoa, there must be something really here. If they're that out of control, hysterical about, us not looking at these issues, maybe it's time to look at these issues here. Anyway, Nick, thank you very much.
Mike, thank you so much.
We're going to let you go and switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike?
I'm doing okay.
I was listening to InfoWars earlier, and it was kind of disturbing. I mean, Alex Jones is really, I think he may be pushing it too hard. He's opening a Washington bureau. Now, the reason why I'm saying that is the head of the bureau is going to be Jerome Corsi, who I've liked through the years. I mean, I think he's a very smart guy, very up on things, but she said something disturbing today. Kind of like the Russians are funding the left. You know, we all know Soros really doing that. All these street demonstrations being funded by Russia. It's just the opposite of the other side is saying. Now, the problem with Corsi is he is very knowledgeable, and he's not really a neocon. But the problem is he's been around for a long time. He's a Cold Warrior. You know, through the Cold War, and it's so you and me, but he's still got that mindset. And the problem is he's got something else that I think clouds his mind, and I think the man's got a drinking problem. I mean, I've heard that before from people, and just watching him, I know people with drinking problems because people I used to work with. You know, it's very easy to spot. You know, and I'm afraid, and you know, I'm afraid that I think Alex Jones might be doing the wrong thing because Jones is even arguing with him. He says, "Now look, what do you mean? You know, you think Putin is pushing this stuff?"
Well, okay.
Yeah,
we're coming up. Let me cut in here. We're coming up on a commercial break here. First of all, as Harry Truman used to say, there's only one thing worse than a man who drinks, and that's one who doesn't. And I take a nip myself in the evenings. So I don't think we should be going after Jerome on that particular issue. It comes across as a personal attack. As far as what Alex Jones wants to do with his network, it is his network. And again, I think that this is not a time for us to be attacking each other's platforms when we've got the entire liberal elite establishment and the corporate media looking to find ways to break us up. So I want to tread very, very carefully here. We'll just see what Jerome Corsi does when he takes over this Washington bureau for Alex Jones. Obviously, Alex has a lot of money coming into him. The problem with that is the money always comes in with strings attached. And so you need to be careful. What won't... Yeah, okay. Anyway, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and I'm just now putting up the videos here from Dr. Stephanie Seneff, and we're just going to finish doing that real quick, and then we'll be back to the radio show. All right, we were talking about immigration and all the problems it is causing. 60 Minutes has now done a story on how bad things are up in Sweden, where refugees from all over the area, Africa, Middle East, are resorting to violence and are creating no-go zones in Sweden, places in Sweden that are only the refugees and nobody else dare goes in there, not even the police. It's literally an invasion and conquest from within. Now, over in Germany, Angela Merkel is still out there on that New World Order. We're going to welcome all the refugees in. But right now, it is estimated it's going to cost Germany 37 billion pounds, the equivalent of it, to fix this migrant chaos. And this is a record amount of money being spent on this issue. So it really is out of control, all because of George Soros and his Open Society Foundation and his globalist dreams and New World Order. Over in Italy, thousands have hit the streets of Rome. They're protesting the refugee program, immigration program there. They're demanding early elections. They want the current government to step down and allow a new government to come on in. The Trump effect is spreading all over the world. Now, Soros and his globalists are hitting the panic button against this nationalistic fervor that their own push for globalism has triggered. And so now there's a George Soros-funded watchdog that has come out with one of the most Orwellian uses of the language I've ever seen. And basically, they're saying that populism will fuel the fires of political corruption. And it seems to me that the political corruption among the globalists and the New World Order people is the real issue here. But that's the newest thing from George Soros. If you don't go along with the global government, you're only going to fuel political corruption. Well, we've all seen from history, the bigger a government becomes, the more corrupt it becomes. A single planetary government would be the most corrupt entity in all of human history. Now, Donald Trump has found a way to immunize himself from George Soros. Trump has already announced he's going to run as president in 2020. And what that means is it is illegal for any non-governmental organization or foundation to speak or act against a candidate because that is interference with an election. It was a brilliant move on Trump's part. It means that Soros has to keep his hands off or risk having his foundations and NGOs shut down and possibly even being tossed in jail. Remember all the brouhaha about Russia interfering with the election? Well, if Soros interferes with the election, everybody's going to say, all right, well, shouldn't we be angry about that? And the answer is yes, you should. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, yesterday I was commenting on how more and more people within the European Union bureaucracy are admitting it's failing. It's falling apart. Oh, what to do, what will replace the European Union? And, of course, to me, the obvious solution is let's let Europe go back to being Europe. Let's let France go back to being France and Italy go back to being Italy and so forth and so on here. But, of course, the globalists don't want that to happen. So the European Union's chief Brexit negotiator is out there pushing a plan saying, yes, the EU trading bloc is failing. Let's make a federal Europe instead. Let's just turn it all into one country, and what used to be a country is now a state, and Brussels will be the European version of Washington, D.C. I can imagine they're all looking forward to that. Let's take a phone call. Nancy in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. I was involved in a conversation, and a lot of criticism was being hurled at President Trump because of his immigration policy, not putting the 90-day ban. And so there was a suggestion that, well, why doesn't Israel, our ally, take some of these, how about they take 2 million refugees? They're going to have plenty of land with their Greater Israel project, and
no, well, you're absolutely right. Israel is out there, at the forefront of screaming that America and Europe have to let all these people from the Middle East in. But, of course, Israel won't allow anybody in to their country. They're trying to kick the Palestinians out. And Israel's agenda here is to try and empty the Middle East in order to make it easier for Israel's expansion.
Exactly. Right. Their Greater Israel. It was so funny to watch the expressions because they were saying, oh, these people are also safe. And I said, oh, good. Then Israel, our ally, can take some of them. Anyway, okay, I don't want to belabor it, but I enjoy listening to you, and I'll let you go.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot. Bye-bye. And, Israel's out there applauding Donald Trump's wall. Mexico kicked up a fuss. Israel's now apologizing to Mexico over that. But the reality is, for all of Israel's out there championing this idea of Europe taking in the Middle Eastern refugees and African refugees and the United States taking them in, Israel itself will not allow them in. Period. End of discussion. And anybody who thinks Israel should allow the refugees in there is just a dirty, filthy anti-Semite who wants Hitler to come back and gas Jewish babies in the ovens. I mean, at this point, Israel is still trying to figure out a way to get the Ethiopian Jews to move back home, despite the Israel's law of return. If you have any Jewish ancestry in you at all, you are allowed to become an Israeli citizen. All right, let's take another phone call. Uri in England, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Actually, Michael, I'm Bulgarian.
Yes.
And proud.
Good.
Yes. And every factory joint is demolished. For example, the First World War, we joined the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Yes.
Eventually, Germany, we lost the First World War. The Second World War, we joined Germany. We lost again. After the war, we joined the USSR. They crumbled. Now, we are in the European Union.
Could I get you to make friends with George Soros?
No.
Boy, you know, I mean, I was okay with you saying you're proud to be Bulgarian, and then you give me that little bit of history, and I'm saying, I'm not so sure I'd be feeling all that proud myself. But I don't think it's that Bulgaria is the kiss of death historically. Just you need to pick your friends a little bit more carefully.
Oh, yes, they are.
Okay, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing. And he did mention something that we all need to keep in mind. World War I supposedly began between Austria-Hungary and Serbia. How did Germany become the villain? Well, because we've got a war going. Let's take out Germany because it's manufacturing and it's making products that we can't compete against. It's always about economics, productivity, industrial base, and so forth and so on. Over in Great Britain, and I'm going to preface this by asking if anybody knows how many people in Great Britain are taking prescription antidepressants, because apparently this child abuse issue is continuing to grow there, and apparently Scotland's National Child Abuse Inquiry is looking at more than 60 residential care schools for youngsters. And some of them are considered the top most expensive boarding schools for the elites. Fetz, Gordonstoun, Loretto, Merchiston Castle are on that list. And I'm just amazed at what is going on over there and these hideous abuses, whether it's in Great Britain or Canada's residential schools. And apparently Anthony Weiner is back in trouble again. Apparently some of the materials found on that laptop that led the New York Police Department to contact James Comey, which forced Comey to reopen the investigation. Apparently they're saying they found underage children in the images on the laptop. So he's looking at child porn charges. I just do not get this. Maybe it's part of the psychopathy of people who seek power and wealth. I really don't understand, but I'm also wondering if maybe, we all know that vaccines are dangerous and GMO and everything. Prescription antidepressants, we already know they are linked to episodes of suicide, mass violence. I drew a link with the increasing per capita use of antidepressants and the increasing per capita incidence of domestic violence. One of the things that these prescription antidepressants do is they result in poor impulse control. You get an impulse, you go with it. The normal inhibitions you would have from your socialization, just aren't there anymore. Maybe somebody's juiced up on these medications. They see a cute little kid and they say, yeah, why not? We really need to find on out. All right, we're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who have just now rejoined our network, and then we're going to take a phone call from Jerry in Chicago. Aloha, Jerry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Thank you very much for taking my call. But earlier you mentioned that Israel doesn't take in any of these refugees. I want to mention two other countries that might not. How about the Vatican, and how about Saudi Arabia?
Well, Saudi Arabia is now taking some of the refugees in because Donald Trump got them to declare 5 areas, safe zones, for some of these refugees. As far as the Vatican, you know, the papal states aren't as large as they were in the Middle Ages, and it's a case of just where would they put them.
Well, again, I mean, doesn't the Vatican have a great big wall built all the way around it also, just like Israel?
Well, yes, they do, and partly that's because so many popes have been assassinated over the ages.
Okay, well, all right. Well, I just wanted to throw that out there because Netanyahu and the Pope both addressed a congressional house last year, didn't they?
Yeah, they did, and the Pope is pro-refugee, but again, you're absolutely right. They're not taking a whole bunch of these Africans and Middle Easterners into Vatican City.
Okay, well, that's all I wanted to add. You have a great day. Thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. Yeah, the Vatican does like its secrecy. By the way, there's a new series out on HBO, The Young Pope, and it's worth watching. It's definitely worth watching. The Vatican does love its secrets, and there have been some wild popes. They're not all meek and humble. Pope Alexander VI especially, through some very, very wild parties in the Vatican. Emphasis on the wild. All righty, now there's a story that is out here from Alabama. And what it is there's this couple, Christian Holm and his wife Danielle. They do not own a home. They live off the grid. They're not homeless in the classical sense that we see people who are living on the streets. They basically live in the wild, hiking and camping. And they move from place to place. And they were basically on their way from Alabama to New Hampshire and back because they wanted to see the country. And they were camping out in northeastern Alabama when Danielle went into labor. So they went to the regional medical center to give birth. And the social workers came in and started asking the couple about their chosen lifestyle and where they lived. And apparently they seized the baby on the excuse that the parents refused to apply for a Social Security card. And they've just taken the baby away. Because how dare you deny the Federal Reserve another tax slave? Now, I'm not sure I agree with raising a child in that particular environment, although obviously 200 years ago that was normal, living in the wild. But I'm getting really upset at this attitude that the government and the corporations own your children. Whether it is confiscating the children because they don't have a Social Security number, or whether it's going in and saying you will shoot your children's arm with these 50 needles, I have a real problem with that. I think maybe in the Bill of Rights there should have been a recognition of a right that we are masters of our own bodies. And we actually used to have laws which said medical treatment could not be administered without the informed consent of the patient. That's now gone. They can stick whatever they want in you, and you have no way of knowing about it. You don't know what's in those chemicals. You don't know if they're good for your kid, bad for your kid, or they're just being pushed because they're hugely profitable. Remember we were reporting last week, the CDC, which got caught rigging a study to try and claim that vaccines were not linked to autism, itself owns more than 20 vaccine patents and earns more than $4 billion every year selling vaccines. They can't be trusted to be an impartial authority or objective observer on vaccine safety. And that's why everybody's knickers are in a twist over this Vaccine Safety Commission that Donald Trump has put together and asked Robert Kennedy Jr. to chair. Now, there's another story here where apparently there's this homeschool father that were using a dietary supplement known as Miracle Mineral Solution. We've seen it around before, MMS. It's not FDA approved. And because of that, Child Protective Services officials raided the home and took his 7 children to punish the family for possessing something that is known to actually cure serious conditions, but is not approved by the FDA and is not producing profits for the medical industrial complex. And this is another case of where the government is acting like they own your children. And you will, by goodness, turn them into consumers of corporate-produced medicines and corporate-produced food and corporate-produced this and corporate-produced that. Now, as of today, apparently, transgender boys are now allowed to join the Boy Scouts of America. Political correctness rearing its head again. Boy Scouts are not what they were when I was a Boy Scout. For one thing, when I was a Boy Scout knife was an 8-inch sheath buck knife. That was a Boy Scout knife. And then you had the little folding knife to go with it. Today's Boy Scouts, oh no, they're not allowed to have that big knife. It's amazing here. All right, let's take another phone call. Steve in Virginia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hello once again. Thank you. We just had a question. We're kind of curious. I know Saudi Arabia, sometimes we never know what to expect from them, and they kind of go with the flow, whatever benefits them, I guess. But I had a question. Can you say why they're offering some safe zones, and when they're really not for example, the Libyan people or the Syrian people, they seem to be more, when it suits them, more friends of the Israeli government, in fact.
And the U.S. government. Saudi Arabia maintains a kind of a very balanced position where they're friends with the United States because they've made so much money off of us with the petrodollar deal. And I'm assuming that there's some kind of a financial quid pro quo where we know Saudi Arabia is in serious economic hardship because of that oil price war. And Donald Trump may have said, we're going to renegotiate some of your debts, or we're going to, stretch out the schedule, or we're going to reduce interest, or something like that. I'm presuming that Saudi Arabia is not doing this out of the goodness of their heart, and I'm presuming that the United States is going to pay for whatever material support is required in those civilian safe zones. But Donald Trump may be thinking that this is only a temporary measure, and he's trying to get the Syrian civilians out of the way while he goes after ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
Yeah. In your opinion, just wondering, do you think that some other countries should have been added to the travel ban? I know it's a temporary situation, or hopefully, but more other than the 7 that they have on the list?
Well, I probably would have added Israel, but that wouldn't have gone very far. But Reince Priebus is saying that, they may add more countries on there. It is a bit of a diplomatic nightmare where we now have all these U.S. diplomats are denouncing Donald Trump, and the White House is saying, if you're not going to support Trump, turn in your resignation right now. And it may seem a little heavy-handed, but remember what I said. When Trump was elected, he's coming into a system that is openly opposing him. And he's dealing with a huge amount of bureaucratic inertia, as was demonstrated by that interim attorney general who's just out there saying, no, we're going to stay with the liberal agenda here. And Trump is sending out a message, get with the administration's agenda or get another job. And I think it's something that he needs to do to try and bring the bureaucracy into line and say that this is a new day, it's a new administration. And remember, if you go all the way back to the Federalist Papers, they acknowledge there that each incoming president is under no obligation to continue the policies of his predecessor.
Yeah. In your opinion, mentioning that, in your opinion, do you think that? Now, I believe he's wanting a strict constitutionalist. I know I think tonight he's supposed to, name the person he's chosen for the court. But would the person who says, "Oh, the Constitution is a living document, it's a, free flowing, and the interpretations can change, and this kind of thing," do you think that would be that mentality basically represents? What would we say? The
liberalism. Yeah, that's the liberal idea. But even George Bush, who's Republican, was saying it's just a blankety-blank piece of paper. But Donald Trump was saying all along that he was looking for a new Supreme Court justice who would basically carry on in the same model as Judge Scalia. And it looks like he's found 2 individuals, and it's already leaking out which one he's going to pick, but they'll be making the formal announcement a little later tonight.
Yeah. If I could, just one more thing that came to my mind when you were mentioning the oil. They've supposedly found the largest reserve in Texas recently, and of course the U.S. itself has other reserves. Do you think that will be coming sometime in the near future? I'm saying the less reliance on the foreign oil, and including Saudi Arabia.
Well, you need to understand, it isn't that the United States wants access to that oil in the Middle East. The goal is to coerce those nations in the Middle East to sell their oil only for the U.S. dollar in order to maintain international demand for the dollars. And so, that's really what it was all about. I mean, after the war in Iraq, there's not a lot of Iraq's oil coming directly to the United States of America, but it's for sale only for the U.S. dollar. The same thing in Libya after they got rid of Gaddafi.
Okay, yeah. So that's those moves are, you say, basically intended to keep the dollar afloat.
Exactly, to keep the dollar propped up so that the Federal Reserve can make interest loaning money to other countries to buy their oil with. Okay?
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for the phone call.
Thank you very much.
Got to take a break for commercials. Back with another phone call after these few words. Well, hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I just got a fascinating email from a lady who lives or lived in Alaska who had a child in 1980 and was told at the hospital that she would not be allowed to leave the hospital with the baby without first filling out the paperwork for a Social Security card. And they live pretty much off the grid as well. They have a tiny cabin, no electricity, no running water. They weren't concerned with any of that in terms of the raising of the child, only making sure the kid was plugged into that Federal Reserve system. Like the good little tax slave the deity intended him to be. All right, we're going to go back to the phones. Francis in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. Hello, aloha, Michael.
Aloha.
When you were talking about the different types of, I guess, immunization shots, MMR, and so forth, ad nauseum, and it just prompted a horrible thought. I know I hear about people getting what's called a cortisone shot if they're having pain in like this joint or that joint, whether it be leg, arm, or who knows what, or their spine. And if they end up doing like a conjunction of several different shots in one, what is stopping the medical profession that's giving them a shot of cortisone to also include something else that they're not even informing the patient of as well?
Well, there's certainly the possibility is there, but I don't think they're going to put anything in there without somebody paying for it. And again, it is a terrible thing to live in a country where you cannot trust your doctor. And we're finding out that, like so many other segments of our society, that the image of the doctor practitioner that we get in film and TV is a fantasy. And that you know, doctors are just as subject to greed. And you know, I keep going back to that one guy who got thrown in prison for 45 years because during his entire medical career he had been telling perfectly healthy patients they had cancer in order to sell them chemotherapy and radiation. And when he got thrown in prison, it wasn't for the harm he caused the patients, it was for defrauding Medicare.
Well, you know, greed says a lot.
Well, the lust for money is the root of all evil, and as our nation plunges deeper and deeper into debt, that desperation to get those little pieces of paper and colored ink is destroying the best aspects of what we used to call the American character.
Have a good one.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now then, it's time to talk about human-caused global warming. New Jersey this morning got 3 inches of snow, caused a little bit of traffic congestion, and they're expecting a little bit more. Over in Pocatello, Idaho, they have got a lot of snow, so much that they're already concerned about possible spring flooding issues and how they're going to deal with that. And that can be a concern here. Now, out in California, as you know, along with the snow that they're getting a huge amount of rain, which is a good thing, because they have these recent storms have basically made up for almost 40% of California's 5-year snow water deficit. So that's a good thing. It's easing the drought out in California. This, unfortunately, does not deal with the issue that some of California's freshwater aquifers have now been contaminated by fracking fluid. And, of course, private companies are continuing to suck the water out of the ground, put it in little plastic bottles, and sell it back to the people of California. Now, over in Lebanon, they had a big storm over the weekend, Storm Perla, which was closing roads all over the country. Several mountain towns were completely blocked by snow. You don't think of Lebanon as a place that really gets a lot of snow. Down in New Zealand, they're still dealing with these summer snowstorms that nobody can explain. And unfortunately, it is starting to harm the agricultural produce down there to the point where the operators of helicopters have a new business, which is to hover over the fruit fields to try and dry them out somewhat, to dry the soggy fruit, just with the downblast of the rotors. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. Back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, over at Loveland Pass, Colorado, the snow is so deep. How deep is it, Michael? It's so deep, it actually buried the avalanche warning sign. They had a huge amount of snow, went out, put up the sign, caution, avalanche danger ahead, and the snow piled up over that. That's a lot of snow. That is a lot of snow. Remember back March 20th, 2000, the UK independent, snowfalls are now a thing of the past. Over in Hungary, Lake Balaton has frozen over so solidly that people can walk on it and even drive trucks on it. And this is the first time it's been completely frozen over in a decade. Now, we're hearing word that Donald Trump is getting ready to pull out of the Paris Agreement. He thinks this whole human-caused global warming thing is a fraud, and he is absolutely right on that one. And apparently, when Donald Trump visits the UK, he's going out of his way to avoid Prince Charles because he doesn't need another lecture about the dangers of human-caused global warming. Prince Charles is fully on board with that, has a lot of his money invested in all of these climate things, so forth and so on here. All right, let's take a phone call. Dan in Hawaii. Aloha, bra. What's up?
Hi, Michael?
Yes.
Hi. I'm here on the Big Island. I'm in Puna on the east side.
Yes.
The temperature last night was 60 degrees.
Yes.
I've been in this house 23 years. This is the coldest known temperature I know about.
Yeah, it's cold over here on Oahu, too. It was down to 62 last night.
Interesting. The thing I just wanted to throw out was, I don't know if you can see subbase from where you are, but I was in submarines down there.
Yes.
Subbase.
Yes.
I'm basically a systems man. I think the primary thing right now for Trump is to pull those troops back off the eastern border in Europe and get those 2,000 high-capacity transformers guarded 24/7. That's it.
Yeah, no, I would like to see Trump try and pull NATO's fangs here. And, you know, but Trump is one guy, and he's dealing with that bureaucratic inertia. I'm sure he'll get to that real soon. And, yes, as a matter of fact, I can stand up here in my office, look out this window, and I can see the submarine base down there. We have a pretty good view of Pearl Harbor. It's not as good as when we first moved in here because the trees on the golf course are cranking on up. But when Obama used to come out here for Christmases, I could actually get out the Celestron and see Air Force One down on the ground there.
My goodness.
Yes.
Okay, Mike, thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Stay warm tonight. And I know for all of you people dealing with snow and ice, the fact that we're out here saying, oh, my goodness, 60 degrees. Well, for Hawaii, that is very cold. And we do have snow on the tips of our mountains as well. Now then, California, following a major lawsuit between Monsanto and the state of California, Monsanto lost. California is now officially declaring glyphosate as cancer-causing and will require Monsanto to put a warning on the product. Use of Roundup and glyphosate is carcinogenic. And they're spraying it on stuff. They're spraying it on women's feminine products. They're putting in the vaccines. I think it's time to reprise that video I did a while back. What are they thinking? Are they going to try and depopulate the world with all these horrible diseases, which allow them to take our wealth from us before we're shoved into a hole or a furnace? Now, down in New Zealand, there's a big fight gearing up there regarding GM crops. And what it has to do with is right now in New Zealand, individual district councils are allowed to decide for themselves whether or not GMO produce is going to be allowed into their area or not. It's kind of a moot point because we know now that the GMO pollen can travel tremendous distances on the wind, insects, and birds. But at this point, there's a big campaign to try and get New Zealand to change the law so that the national government will declare that GMO is acceptable everywhere. And we're still going through all of our spilkas here in Hawaii regarding Maui and their desire to have GMO-free environment. And the New Zealand anti-GM movement are trying to take their case to social media. And they're pointing out Bustock New Zealand's apples right now are free of any genetic modification. And that is a good thing because, as you know, the U.S. government has approved a genetically modified apple that's modified so it doesn't turn brown as quickly, which means it can sit in the truck a lot longer and get to the supermarket still looking like it's fresh even though it really isn't. And because of the corruption from Monsanto in our country, we still do not have GMO labeling. But you can look for apples that are labeled product of New Zealand. And you're going to have to be very, very careful. We have a government corporate entity that is absolutely unconcerned with whether you're healthy or not. In fact, the sicker you are, the more the medical industrial complex likes it. Despite the fact that we have the most expensive health care on planet Earth, the quality of our medical care is ranked 33rd, and the overall health of Americans is considered poor. Now, there's a new problem coming on out, and that is a new generation of genetically modified insects that are being developed supposedly as a form of pest control, where you will throw these particular GM insects into your fields and they will drive the non-GM insects out and hopefully reduce damage to your crops, maybe not. The problem is that in the process of harvesting the food and getting it to the supermarket, tiny bits of insects inevitably get caught up and can become part of the food. And the particles are so small you can't see them, and the FDA literally has allowable limits of insect contamination on food in the United States of America. And a lot of the people who are still trying to grow GMO-free produce are now concerned that the presence of these insects form another form of contamination, which would result in their crops being turned away from those nations that ban GMO, such as China. And once again, GMO technology, genetic technology, is the most dangerous technology humans have ever played with. It's far more dangerous than nuclear power because we're tinkering with the very code of life itself. And if they make a mistake, if that epicite gene has really broken into the wild, we're looking at extinction-level events, and nobody seems to be too concerned about it because they're too busy reading their quarterly stock reports. Now, Panera has made a promise to phase out all artificial ingredients, artificial food dyes, preservatives, and all GMO. And they're including in there, if you can't pronounce it, we're not using it. And so they started their whole franchise with this ad campaign, Live Consciously, Eat Deliciously. So now they have kept that promise. Their menu is 100% clean, so we can expect Panera to get hit with a string of E. coli contaminations the way Chipotle's did when they declared they were going to be GMO-free. You watch. It will happen. All of a sudden, oh, Panera's got botulism, they've got E. coli, they've got all these terrible things. Run for your lives back to the safety of your GMO chemically added food. All right, let's grab a phone call. Keith in Indiana, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hello, Michael. You know, the news is flying by so fast.
Yes.
I started thinking about something. You remember Bernie Madoff?
Yes.
Do you know where he's imprisoned? Anywhere in any state in America?
He's imprisoned. He's, in fact, in the same prison as the convicted Israeli spy, Jonathan Pollard. Apparently, they've become good friends.
Okay, and what prison is that?
I do not recall off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure a web search will get it for you.
Well, I don't think it will. I tried and I tried and I tried, and I can't find it, and no federal officer, nobody will give any information. I thought you would know.
Well, let's see. Butner, I think.
Okay.
Okay. All right,
We'll
thanks.
try that, but let me ask, I just have a couple more for you.
Real quick.
Your wife, Claire, said a couple of weeks ago that she married an Asiatic. Are you an Asiatic?
Partly. I'm your basic mutt, Heinz 57 variety, and my ancestry is Sephardic, Portuguese, a little bit of Chinese, French, and English, and according to family legend, there's a Huron in the woodpile.
Wow, that's quite a number.
We get around. We get around. What can I tell you?
All right, I respect your wisdom. Your opinion on oil, biotic or abiotic?
Abiotic. Well, let me rephrase that back. I don't think all of the oil and petroleum comes from rotting dinosaurs. I think it is being created deep in the Earth's crust. Microbes may be involved, but there was some research that showed that under pressure, methane will spontaneously start forming these longer chain hydrocarbon molecules. And so that the Earth is continuously creating oil deep inside, and when the oil sort of gets dry, it becomes coal. But the problem is, if it's too deep and you can't get at it, it's no good. If it takes a barrel of oil's worth of energy to get a barrel of oil to the surface of the Earth, then the game is over. It doesn't pencil out.
Okay, that sounds all right, fine. And last question, since, I'm sure you'll agree with this, that we who listen to these alternative radio stations should be able to question the hosts, right?
Yeah, and by the way, we call it we call it the independent media, not the alternative media. Go ahead.
Okay, independent. That's good. Okay,
yep.
Fine. Now, your position about God, you are what? You're a humanist or an atheist? Are you an atheist?
I'm an atheist, and Claire's a Methodist.
So, in other words, the people who are Christians who are listening to RBN are supposed to believe you, who's an atheist. That makes no sense to me.
Well, first of all, I don't ask people to believe me. I'm giving you all pointers to go out and do your own digging and your own analysis.
Well, that's why I don't believe you.
Okay, well, fine, then don't believe me. Okay, then don't believe me. I don't care. I'm not asking for your belief and faith or trust. In fact, trusting people in the corporate media is a big part of what got us into this mess. Now, getting on over to Japan, the Japanese government has now issued a proclamation that the food from Fukushima is safe and can be eaten all over the country and all over the world. I'm so glad. I've given up sushi, now I can go back to sushi, even the ones that are glowing in the dark here. Now, the reality is people are, in fact, becoming a lot more health conscious. They're becoming aware that corporations are serving up food that isn't necessarily nutritious. It's going to be tasty. That's what generates sales. It may not be nutritious. And McDonald's is seeing their sales dip in the United States more than in any other country. And partly that is the economic realities. Partly it's because McDonald's abandoned its original marketing strategy of providing meals at the lowest possible cost. They tried to move upscale at a time when the economy was moving down. And that was a bad strategic decision. But the other part of it is this growing awareness that it's very important what you're eating in terms of what it does to your body. And we're becoming more and more aware of these chemicals, which are harmful, in many cases are designed to make us eat more, to raise profits for the food corporations, and that's where a big part of America's obesity epidemic is coming from. It isn't our lifestyle choices. We are being sold food with chemicals added to it that make us eat more so that we will buy more, spend more money, and boost the profits. Aspartame, supposed to be an artificial sweetener to help you with your diet, actually makes you crave carbohydrates, along with its other problems of being a neurotoxin. Monosodium glutamate is marketed as a flavor enhancer. That interferes with the signal in the brain that says, I've had enough to eat. And then there are all these growth hormones that are pumped into livestock. And if it's not fully metabolized, people who are eating the dairy and meat from these animals, the growth hormones are affecting them the way it affects the livestock. Now, a couple of years ago, Claire and I just made a point of giving up anything with aspartame, anything with monosodium glutamate. You're very careful about hormone-free produce, and I'm down almost 80 pounds from my worst weight. And I didn't change any other aspect of my lifestyle than simply avoiding these chemicals. And I advise you to do the same here. Let's see. A little bit of good news. The Conservative Tribune is reporting that Republicans in Congress are getting ready to roll back Michelle Obama's school lunch program, meaning your kids can wave a fond farewell to all of that inedible corporate-produced crud, and we're going to have Taco Tuesdays back again. And as I said at the time, you know you live in a dictatorship when the dictator's wife tells your kids what they're going to eat for lunch. Now, here is a story coming out of the Daily Mail. And the headline is, Doctors Gave Me Depression Pills I Didn't Need for 20 Years. And you need to read this article because this guy was given these medications. He was on them for 20 years. He quit them 5 years ago. He's still suffering the after effects. And you really need to look at this because the healthcare system all over the world is not about health. It's about profit. Now, apparently, just ahead of the inauguration, hackers disabled 70% of the Washington, D.C. closed-circuit TV network. They shut down 123 of 187 network video recorders, demanded a ransom which was not paid. Technicians simply wiped and rebooted all the devices. If riots had broken out, they wouldn't have been able to keep an eye on them. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program on this Tuesday here. Story just now crossed my desk here. Apparently, the European Council President Donald Tusk has called U.S. President Donald Trump an existential threat to Europe. Now, I was unaware of a plan by the United States government to declare war on Europe. And I think if you want to look at an existential threat to Europe right now, you might want to look out on the streets because I don't see any refugees from the United States sexually assaulting the women and vandalizing the buildings. I don't think we're part of the problem at all. All right, we're going to take one more phone call here from Paula in Chicago. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Paula, are you there?
Taking turpentine and castor oil. What's the dosage? Is it 1 teaspoon of turpentine per 1 teaspoon of castor oil 4 times a day?
Wait a minute. First off, you shouldn't be taking any turpentine. The call got to me late. I didn't hear the first part of what you said, but turpentine is a very toxic material.
Right. I thought I was calling the Dr. Jennifer Daniels show.
No, you got Mike Rivero. But thank you for the phone call.
Oh, yeah, because her number, his number.
Well, you've got the wrong time of day. All right. Anyway, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and we're going to close the phone lines. Claire is in the other room laughing. Okay. Now then, I want to go back to that call that we got from the guy who was screaming at me about why should we believe you, and you shouldn't. Beliefs are chains that hold free minds slave. You are taught to believe things at a very young age in order to control you. The belief that your government is good, the belief that all the other governments are bad, the belief that we are somehow superior, the belief in Santa Claus if you behave correctly, and so forth and so on. No chains of iron or steel ever bound a human being tighter than the chains made of those beliefs we're indoctrinated with as children. I seek a world free from all belief. I seek a world where everybody is thinking and observing and analyzing critically. Because that is a world that will be free of corruption, free of fraud, like human-caused global warming. I mean, look at all the things we're being told we must believe that the corporate media didn't mean to behave as badly this last year. Beliefs are chains that hold free minds slaves. Free your mind. And where you start is avoiding belief as any kind of a foundation for a thought process. We need a rational society, a logical society, a society that thinks critically, that doesn't just have conditioned responses based on beliefs. Beliefs are a poor substitute for facts. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and do the Jim Goddard Show. We'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices. Take what you learn here, share it with everybody else. You are all part of the independent media, and the corporate media has declared war on us all. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.